Hola, buenos noches and such. So what I got this Pittsburgh, Harbor Freight Pro composite handle 1/2-inch ratchet, and I got a couple Stanley ratchets next to it, and I just wanted to show what this is really quick, what they look like inside. That's a spider. Oh my god, look at the size of that. Oh, and we can just look at them, kind of compare them and see what they are. Not really which is better video. The Harbor Freight's a better ratchet, just hands down, but we'll just show what it is and cover whatnot. What's kind of interesting is the two Stanley ratchets. They're 89819 ratchets. They're the same model number, but they're completely different build. The retainer for this top one is a C-clip, and the bottom one has a cover plate and a couple screws. It's you can take it apart much easier than this. So weird that they sell those the same like that. This has two screws through the back into the faceplate on the other side. Pretty typical design. That's what you get in like Max and Protos and stuff like that. This is a Proto. But yeah, they're all 1/2-inch ratchets, and more or less the same thing inside. All of them are high gear tooth count, and they all kind of look like this inside. Now, moments ago, you may recall that I said these are quite similar inside. It depends what you want to go with. The actual drive gears are pretty close to what they are. I mean, there's not much difference there. If I can get this one out, yes. I mean, you see there's not a whole hell of a lot difference. This is a larger tooth than this. This is a finer tooth ratchet, the Harbor Freight, and whatever you want to do with that information, that's what it is. This just goes in. It's hard to show how these work, but this has a pawl here at the bottom, and it just grabs the teeth on that. In theory, the Stanley will have more engagement than the Harbor Freight. I've used both of them. They both function the same. I haven't had any real, differences between them. The problem is the Stanley ratchet has these two ball bearings and they suck. Disassembly of this ratchet is as follows. Open it up, pull that out. That's it, done. There ain't much to them. This is what they consider to be a seal. It just sits here on top of the drive gears. The 1/4-inch also have this. The Pittsburgh Pro also, both of them do. And that's considered a sealed head when they put that on there. It doesn't seal shit. It's just a marketing thing, and they put the cheapest stamp piece of Chinese steel they can on there. These come out, and there's a special way to put them back in. You have to have the spring orientated correctly when it goes back in. The fat side needs to be against the body, so it needs to sit in there like that. If that shows up on camera, I don't know. And then, you get these nice, gears here. These are, you call them pawls. I'm going to call them pawls. But they sit in the body like that. They're pretty, similar to a Proto. They're not much different from a Proto ratchet design. Works totally fine. Works well. I enjoy it. It's the same design as the 1/4-inch ratchets, more or less. It's not really any different. Same, high tooth count. This probably has more teeth in the ratio than the 1/4-inch ratchet, just because there's more surface area. And these are pretty, fine teeth on here. But it's got the same drive mechanism. These, two pawls. I think they're called pawls in this instance, and they just run up against, the teeth when it engages. It provides pretty serious torque. I tore apart a transfer case with this ratchet. I had no issues, and I've got all these Macs and whatever else, and this is perfectly reasonable for whatever it is. And the price point, I mean, this is like, I don't know, I think it's like $12 or something with a coupon. It's a pretty cheap ratchet. The Stanley ratchets are just about the same. I think they're like $12, $15. It depends how Walmart wants to price them that day, but they're all over the place at Walmart. I guess that's the reason you would buy the Stanley ratchet over the Harbor Freight if you don't have a Harbor Freight in your house. They're pretty much everywhere now. But, overall, it's a pretty decent ratchet. It has, the same issues as any other quick release ratchet. You take that much of an area out of that drive gear, you severely compromise its integrity. And then you've got all the mechanism inside of it, like all the way through. It's a pretty solid chunk of metal they have to mill out to put that assembly inside of it. It'd be stronger if it didn't have that, and I wish it did. The professional ratchet, the Pittsburgh Professional 1/4 inch. I have one of them. It doesn't have the quick release mechanism, so it's a solid back on it, like a, you know, like a Proto or a Mac or something. And they, in theory, have a stronger, you know, drive gear because they don't have that much metal taken out. So, you know, that's the trade-off with those. You know, overall, it's pretty decent ratchet. However, here's where the gripes and bitching comes in. They ship this ratchet exactly like this. I've had it, you know, it's been sitting around for a while, but it ain't been sitting around that long. And I never oiled this when I got it. I just bought it, you know, to throw in a vehicle and, you know, in case I need it. It is dry as can be. There is just nothing inside. There's a little tiny dollop of, you know, some kind of Chinese grease on one drive gear. The other side's totally dry. That's not adequate for anything. This here is the direction Paul change dealio. What's interesting about these is they've, it's a solid piece. It's not stamped, you know, together, punched or anything like that. It's not good metal, but it is a solid piece of metal. And, you know, compared to a Proto, the Proto, you have to stamp that down. It has to be punched down. It's a little pin that goes through to get that on there. Same with the snap-ons. If you have a replacement kit, they're just garbage. These are held on with a screw, which I've seen people, they get loose and they fall off, and then your ratchet's fucked up until you get a parts kit. The Stanleys are not that way. The Stanley ratchets, it sits like in a slot, but it's got this huge thing that like slides under the body. It's just a really weird, ugly thing inside. The Stanley ratchets are just garbage inside. But yeah, this is a pretty, you know, solid piece of metal here. I wouldn't worry about that breaking off at any point. So I took this all apart. You know, this is what it's like inside. It's not a plastic ratchet. A lot of people think this is a plastic ratchet. It's just a plastic molding on the outside. It's the same thing inside as the professional, the Harbor Freight professional ratchets with the red, you know, handle. There's no difference between these. Same machine parts inside. I mean, it's all the exact same stuff, like the parts interchange. There's no difference. And, you know, it's nasty in there. And I took this apart because I want to clean it. It needs to be cleaned. It needs to be oiled correctly. So that's my next step. If you wanted to degrease this, I think professionally, take it outside and hit it with a bunch of brake cleaner. It'll probably discolor this plastic. I don't know for sure. My other one I haven't done that with, but what I'm using is rubbing alcohol, so I'm going to do that. That is the totality of the amount of grease that this came with out of the factory. It's just, you've been better off just not put any on there. What's the point of even spending time, you know, putting that little dab on there? It's just stupid. You can see inside the body here where that is starting to rust. That's the problem when you don't oil your ratchets. It just, you know, if it's the specific, if it's a type of metal that'll rust, it's going to rust. So the reason I degrease these before I put new grease in, I don't want the old grease on there staying there and preventing like this Permatex from sticking to the part. Sometimes these greases, they repel each other. It's kind of like a hydrophobic effect, and if you leave the old grease on, it can do that. Who knows if that's true or not? I've made that up in my mind, but that's what I believe, and that's how I treat it. So I strip everything off on the old grease, and then I put new stuff on, which is what we're doing next. Yay! This is red Permatex. It's horrible, but it's the best. Yay! It makes a fucking massive mess anytime you do anything with it. I don't know. I've started to do where I don't put as much on. I used to just flood the ratchets with it and then just, you know, let it leak out and deal with it after that. But you see it just, oh my God, it makes such a mess. But it's good stuff, man. You can't buy a better ratchet lube. I don't think you can. I've tried a lot of stuff. This is pretty good. The thing with this stuff is it stays on the ratchet teeth. Like, it doesn't move around. It's really thick, and it's, you know, like 3-in-1 will evaporate over time, and it just breaks down, and it gets dry. It just dries out. WD-40 does not stay at all. A lot of people think WD-40 is, you know, is like a lubricant that you want to use on stuff. It's not. It's not good for anything. It's just shit. Stop buying it. And God damn it, this stuff is a mess. But you see this stuff, it just gets everywhere. I don't know how to convey to anyone how thick it is, but you can see that it just, you know, it tendrilizes once you pull your fingers away from it. So, I mean, this is a pretty well-coated part here. It doesn't really have that much on it, but when you put it in and you start adding other parts, it quickly adds up. The other purpose for surface coating all of these parts in like a high stickment lube, it prevents surface rust, which is, you know, not ideal. The other thing goes here. I think these go with the letter up. I can't remember. I wasn't paying any attention. But you put these in with the letter up, and then you put the spring behind them. And oh God, don't go on the floor. And shove a spring in. Look at my cookies! Woo! You know, pour a bunch of it in there. This is this. And getting this in is not a complicated endeavor. Good thing I took it apart. I forgot the fucking gasket thing. Just, you know, put that in there. Putting this in, just turn it in whatever direction it goes in. But the difference is when you oil this little bitch, the difference in sound is massive. They sound so much better when they've got a whole bunch of red Permatex in them. And that's really the biggest reason I use this shit. It's such horrible stuff to deal with, but it just makes a huge difference in these ratchet teeth. They glide so much better. It feels like it tightens the ratchet up and makes it perform on a level that is comparable to something that's actually worth something. You know, you turn a $10 ratchet into something that feels a hell of a lot better than it did to start with. And, you know, you saw earlier how little lube is inside of these ratchets, and it's shocking how poorly they come from the store. And this ratchet here, I've had that red Permatex in for quite a while, and you can still see some of it down there. This is not a sealed ratchet in any capacity. I mean, this thing, it's just wide open. I mean, it's just a couple pieces of metal, but you see all the teeth on this ratchet have that stuff still on there. This could even use some more, but the point is it doesn't dry out. All this other shit you put in, like 3-in-1 and everything, it just dries out. It just dissipates into the atmosphere. It off gases, who knows what. But it doesn't stay. And this red Permatex does. It stays on there for a long time. This is an old ratchet too. I mean, I probably did a video for this a long time ago, maybe. And it's still fine. Like, it's totally, you know, oiled up inside. There's no surface rust at all. God, this fucking pin thing dropped out. I'm trying to finesse it with some degree. God damn it. Will that go in? Oh shit, it did. And now the fucking bottom's fucked up. God damn it, these fucking pieces of shit. And then putting these back together, I mean, you just put the screws back in. It's not a whole fucking ordeal. Harbor Freight Ratchet uses this special screw here to hold the gear change lever through the faceplate. So yeah, if you lose that, you definitely probably can't use a normal screw. So that's back together now. You know, you just put screws there and there. So I mean, this ratchet, is it worth buying? You know, it's not bad. I mean, if you just want a cheap little ratchet like to throw in a toolbox and then have one, I mean, it's like 10 or 12 bucks for, you know, a 1/2-inch ratchet. You can buy the Stanleys. The Stanleys are the same price. However, the issue is with these Stanleys, you end up getting multiple versions of the same part number. These are both 89819 ratchets. They're completely different, you know, design and bodies and everything like that. They're shit. They've got plastic inside of them and stuff. They're not good ratchets. They feel like shit. They don't work the same. However, this is slightly better. It's not a plastic ratchet. Everybody thinks it's a plastic ratchet. You know, it's a full metal body all the way through. It just has a plastic coating on it so you can use it out in the cold. That's the purpose of it. Nobody knows that. It's so you can take it outside like in the winter in the ice and shit, and it doesn't like freeze to your hands or slip out of them or something, you know, because plastic doesn't conduct heat the same way metal does. So that's the idea for it. But, you know, it's also, you know, if you need a non-sparking ratchet, like, don't use this. This is not a non-sparking ratchet. You have to go through like Ampco to buy a non-sparking ratchet. Do not buy this and expect to work on a fucking petroleum gas line or something like that. You know, that's not what this is at all. Don't do that. You know, otherwise, this is, you know, if you set your expectations to what you're getting for 15 bucks, it's, you know, a pretty decent disposable, you know, ratchet. It will not, you know, outpull a Mac or something like that, you know, anything of actual value, Mac Proto, anything. It is not better than them. But, you know, for like 15 bucks, you know, for a 1/2 inch ratchet, it definitely works. I mean, you could definitely torque some stuff down with it, you know, pull off stuff. I believe you could probably change lug nuts with this. I don't know. I haven't done it. I would imagine it's probably not out of spec for it. You know, where you should be using a breaker bar. It'd be interesting to try it. Maybe I'll go do that for a video someday. Is it worth anything though? That's the thing too. When you buy like, you know, nice Mac ratchets and stuff, they have value. Like if you know, if you want to get rid of them or something, you know, these old Mac ratchets, they're very fucking hard to find now. And they're very, very good fucking ratchets. I love the way they feel and everything. You know, I prefer these over any other kind of ratchet, but these fucking Harbor Freights, they're not worth anything. They have no value. So, I mean, if you're trying to invest in something that has some kind of value, if you need to sell it or whatever you're doing, these are worth nothing. You know, they have no value to anyone. I wouldn't pay 10 cents for this at a yard sale. You know, that's kind of the rundown on tool pricing, I guess. I also don't think this is something you want to buy if you're working in a shop. You know, it's so much fucking around. If you break this fucking thing and skip teeth, you got to go all the way down to fucking Harbor Freight and then fuck around down there, and they want your ID and they want you to fill out a fucking form asking why it's broken, why you want to swap it out. It's just fucking around. I hate it. You know, the Macs, you break a fucking Mac, it's not any better really, but if you got a truck that comes to your shop, you just say, hey, I broke this fucking thing, give me a new one. You know, I guess that's the difference in warranties on those. Proto, you know, funny enough, Mac and Proto are both owned by Stanley Tools these days. I've had the same experience between them getting replacement, you know, kits and stuff, but the problem is you have to get them through the mail. So I mean, if you skip a tooth on a Proto or a Mac and you don't have a truck, you have to wait for the mail, which is not quick. You know, so maybe if that is your only option, you're up in fucking Alberta and all you got's a fucking Harbor Freight or something. Maybe you do want, you know, Harbor Freight ratchets. You know, I don't know. So I don't know. You know, this is what it is. I don't hate it. I do use it once in a great while. I have a 1/4 inch one of these that I use kind of all the time because it's just wherever I need it. You know, I've got one laying somewhere. Like I've got probably 3 of them in my goddamn vehicles. They just sit around, you know, and if you fucking need a 1/4 inch ratchet, you need a 1/4 inch ratchet. And, you know, they work pretty decently. And they're all fine tooth, you know, and once you grease them up, they all sound like this too. They're pretty decent little things to work with. I don't know if there's anything else to cover on this ratchet. You know, it's a lot better than the stupid Stanley ratchets. I do not recommend those to anybody. They have black ones and stuff like that too. Like if you spend more money, you get like their black chromed socket set. It comes with a bunch of these ratchets and they're not worth anything. They're all shit. They're all the same thing inside. The Stanley sockets are really nice though. I do use those all the time. They're really, you know, they're not Chinesium as much as the cheapest Harbor Freight sockets. They're slightly step up above that. They're all CRV, but these are not as shitty as the Harbor Freight cheap sockets, which I have a bunch of those right there. Those are fucking awful sockets. Don't buy those. I think they were free. They may have been free with a coupon. I think that's why I have them. I don't know. Something like that. These are the cheapest Harbor Freight sockets. They're not even Pittsburgh Pro brand. They're just like, God, they're so fucking cheap. They're not even deburred inside that hole. This is a Pittsburgh Pro impact socket. How the fuck did I do that to it? Jesus Christ. It's kind of funny. I just noticed that if you push this down just flat on a table, that comes right off. That's kind of funny. I thought it was broke for a second, but it's just because it's laying the pusher thing. If you push it down just a little bit, it comes right out. And this is a 1/2 inch on the 1/2 inch, and, you know, etc., etc. You know, I haven't had any issues with it. You know, taking a socket on and off, very easy to do. You know, pretty decent little ratchet. Another thing with these ratchets too, you have to push down the plunger thing to put a socket on it. You know, something like a Mac or whatever, you don't have to do that, but you have to push down the quick eject button to get a socket on it. You can't just force it on there. I don't like that. It just, you know, it's more fucking around. These are not necessary in any way anyway. Nobody fucking loses a socket like this. Like, they have no purpose. So that's gonna end this video here. You know, it's a cheap ratchet, but it's not a complete piece of trash. You know, I definitely prefer this over other cheap ratchets, and you're going to be very hard pressed to find cheap 1/2 inch ratchets that even function. So I mean, this is not the worst thing in the world. You know, you get what you pay for. It's not perfect, and it doesn't have any value. Like, you're not going to resell it to anybody ever for anything. But, you know, it works fairly well in what I've done with it. I'm not going to say you can go out, you know, and break lug nuts with it all goddamn day long. I imagine it may or may not even do that once. I'm going to have to try that out someday. But, you know, if you just need a cheap ratchet, you know, to throw in a toolbox or something, leave in your vehicle, this isn't bad. I would trust this 1,000 times before I use any of these Stanley ratchets ever again. I mean, it's not bad at all. You put some nice oil in it, and, you know, it's not terrible. It's a pretty decent little ratchet, so that's about it.